Our last activity is Research Roundup. In this activity, you'll use what you learned about primary and secondary sources and about the history of Georgia during the American Revolution to complete the game. Now, for this activity, I want you to imagine that you're an archivist working at the Georgia Historical Society. And 4 researchers have come into the Research Center to ask for your help in finding resources. For this activity, you'll see that each researcher is studying a different topic related to the American Revolution. Your job will be to read through each of their topics and then select one primary source and one secondary source to help get them started. For this activity, you'll be given 4 primary sources and 4 secondary sources. It's your job to match a primary source and a secondary source to the topic the researcher is studying. Just like in our source sort game, on one side you'll find an image of the primary or secondary source, and on some of them on the back side you'll find an excerpt to give you more information about the source. Okay, teachers, pause this video and put 10 minutes on the clock. After 10 minutes are up, play the video and find out the answers. Okay, let's see how good a job you did as an archivist for the Georgia Historical Society. Our first researcher is studying the experience of enslaved people in Georgia during the American Revolution. So from your options, the best primary source would be this runaway slave advertisement from the Georgia Gazette. And your best secondary source for this researcher is a New Georgia Encyclopedia article called Slavery in the Revolution. Our second researcher is studying how the American Revolution impacted Georgia's economy. Your best primary source for this researcher is military scrip from the Revolutionary War. Scrip was a type of money that was printed in Georgia to help support the military. And the best secondary source for this researcher is the book called On the Rim of the Caribbean, Colonial Georgia and the British Atlantic World. And in the excerpt on the back, you learn how a boycott of Georgia goods impacted their economy when the Georgians were hesitant to join the American Revolutionary cause. Our third researcher is studying major battles that took place in Georgia during the American Revolution. And for that researcher, your best primary source is this plan of the Siege of Savannah and this chapter from a textbook that goes into detail about the events at the Siege of Savannah. And finally, our last researcher is studying the experience of Loyalists, also called Tories, in Georgia during the American Revolution. And your best primary source for this researcher is the Statement of Georgia Loyalists from the Loyalist Papers at the Georgia Historical Society. And your best secondary source is an article from the Georgia Historical Quarterly called The Losses and Compensation of Georgia Loyalists. And on the back, you learned a little bit about how after the war, the Loyalists lost their property and had to leave Georgia. I hope you've learned a little bit about Georgia during the American Revolution and have had a chance to see some of the interesting primary and secondary sources we have at the archives of the Georgia Historical Society. I encourage you to explore the resources inside each of these activities even further to learn more about Georgia in the American Revolution.